Hello, BookTube, and welcome to day 3 of March Mystery Madness. That's a big multi-channel BookTube event, a venerable thing that happens every year in which a bunch of BookTubers get together and urge everybody else to celebrate their love of murder mysteries. It's hosted by Elizabeth at Lizzie Faye Loves Books and a whole bunch of other BookTubers, including myself, and we're doing all sorts of stuff, a Goodreads group, Twitter sprints, live shows, and apart from all the stuff that we're doing together, we're also doing lots of stuff individually. It's a perfect illustration, as I said yesterday, of the variety that BookTube can present. And the kind of take or spin that I think it's probably the bulk of March Mystery Madness is probably going to take on this channel is going to concern new releases. Because that's mostly what I read. And because in any given month, any given 3-month span, you are going to be flooded in new release murder mysteries of one kind or another. We talked about how the umbrella of murder mysteries is so big that it shelters a huge number of different kinds of books that technically count. And a lot of these books now are books in series. If you are an enterprising writer and you decide to write a murder mystery about a bungling, totally inept private investigator in India, and it takes off with your readers, how this character stumbles literally upon the solutions to his crimes and then grandiosely takes credit for them, or something like that. If you do anything like that and it takes off with your readers, then you'll probably do a second one and a third one and a fourth one. And as a result, the field of murder mysteries is littered from one end to the other with some very long-running series. And the book I want to talk about today is one of those. This is the latest novel from Donna Leone, who has written now 28 murder mysteries set in Venice, set in contemporary Venice. The latest one is Unto Us a Son is Given. All the latest ones are beautifully designed by, who is the publisher? I ought to know who Donna Leone's publisher is. Atlantic Monthly Press. They all look just lovely now. They all have photograph covers of her iconic setting. These books are now an institution in Venice, and an institution of Venice for a large part of the world that will never go there. They star a police inspector, Guido Brunetti, who is happily married. His wife, Paola, is a wonderful character in her own right, and she is the daughter of a count, a Venetian count, who features prominently in this latest novel. The Brunettis have a happy, untroubled marriage. They are a happy couple. Brunetti has a happy domestic world. And Donna Leone has just seen content to leave it that way, which is one of the many, many safe harbors of this series. They are, in some ways, a blend of police procedural and individual detective. Brunetti is very much a cop. He learned to think early in his life as a policeman, and he's never really abandoned that way of thinking. But he's also far more observant than any of his colleagues, and a lot of times sees mysteries where the police would not. But by this point, Venice is in some ways a very small town. It's an international tourist destination, the greatest one in the world, and its indigenous population has been shrinking steadily over time, and in a skyrocketing ratio recently. If you have a small shop selling flowers and fish, and you have 2 rooms behind your shop where you live, and that allows you to just barely make your rent, and you decide instead to make that whole space, which is not very big, a bed and breakfast, you can make easily enough money to cover your rent and an apartment on the mainland, so that you don't have to think about it. And so, as a result, you don't live in Venice anymore. You just host a constant merry-go-round of strangers. And that was true even before the bed and breakfast. As I say bed and breakfast, the Airbnb is what I meant. Even before that craze took off. Even before that craze goes hand in hand with the internet. But even before then, the number of people who actually live in Venice as a normal town has always been relatively small. And the reason why I smile a little when I hold up this book, for those of you who are new to this channel, is that I used to be one of those people. I went to Venice years and years ago to visit, and I thought that I would stay for a while because it was reputed to be an enchanting place, and I felt its enchantment an immediate gut level, far greater level than I thought, than I expected that I would. And I just approached my landlady about maybe staying. I hadn't taken a room in a hotel or anything, or pensione or anything like that. I'd taken a room short term in a big rackety old house, and she agreed. So I stayed for a while. I stayed for a long time, and I got to know the city of Venice and the people and the moods. And often that causes me to be short-tempered with books set there, because it yields itself to writers who mostly know it through guidebooks and romantic accounts. But the real Venice, a lot of the real Venice is captured in these Donna Leon books. That's, I think, a part of why they have such enduring population with their fans. And they're also incredibly popular in Venice, which Venetians are not a particularly literary people. They're not a particularly literary subset of Italy. You will find cities in Italy that are much more literary than Venice, but they would be quick to pounce on something that were noticeably false. So this definitely falls under the category of what we mentioned a few days ago, of a location series. We mentioned that one of the subcategories of mystery, that, and they can all blur together, that one of those subcategories is location-based murder mysteries, where the location is a big part of why the thing is successful, a big part of why it exists at all. And that is definitely true. This may be one of, if not the most foremost current example of that anywhere in the mystery genre. Maybe Rebus's Scotland, but I think these foremost above all. And in this particular volume, the murder mystery is going to strike close to home, close to that close-knit family that I mentioned, because Brunetti's father-in-law, Il Conte, a genial and somewhat shady man. In previous novels, he has always seemed a little bit ill-defined, very much intentionally on the part of the author. Like maybe the stuff that we and his daughter and his policeman son-in-law would rather not know. And in this story, things come front and center, because Brunetti's father-in-law takes him aside to tell him about an event that's happening in his circle that he doesn't like and that he would like investigated. Actually, let me read you a bit. Let's see here. Count Falier, that's Il Conte, that's his father-in-law, was urging his Venetian son-in-law to investigate and preferably to intervene in the seemingly innocent plan of the Count's best friend, the elderly Gonzago Rodrigo de Teja, who is a very high-ranking and long-term member of the Count's businesses. So he's a wealthy and well-invested man. To adopt a much younger man as his son. Under Italian inheritance laws, this man would then be heir to Gonzalo's entire fortune, a prospect Gonzalo's friends find appalling. For his part, Brunetti wonders why the old man, a close family friend, can't be allowed his pleasure in peace. And yet, what seems an innocent on the Venetian surface can cause tsunamis beneath. Gonzalo unexpectedly and literally drops dead on the street, and one of his friends, who just arrived in Venice for the memorial service, is strangled in her hotel room, having earlier sent Gonzalo an email saying, "We are the only ones who know you cannot do this," referring to the adoption, or so we think. Now, with an urgent case to solve, Brunetti reluctantly untangles the long-hidden mystery in Gonzalo's life that ultimately led to murder, a resolution that brings him far more pain than satisfaction. And as you can see, everyone starts with a map of Venice, just in case you're unfamiliar with the various neighborhoods and their signature canals. And the obvious inference here is that the young man who's being adopted is a conniving gold digger. The Count tells Brunetti that he has a history with drugs, not only using them but selling them, and that he's bad news. But Donna Leon never does anything by accident. She is by now an incredibly practiced mystery writer. And at the beginning of the book, she talks about a young Brunetti's reading habits. And one of the books that was impressing him, as he's recalling in his memories and to the Count at the time, was a certain French novel. A certain French historical novel about the Emperor Hadrian. And Brunetti mentions that he's also reading about Hadrian in Roman history, and the Count says, well, the two are equally fictitious, but one is more interesting than the other. The French novel, that is not at the beginning of the book condescended to be named, the Count pronounces to be silly. In other words, it's not Augustus who's mentioned at the beginning of a book about an older man wanting to adopt a much younger man as his heir. It's Hadrian, whose signature famous attribute as a Roman emperor in the thumbnail version is his long infatuation with a much younger man. And even that plot description on the dust jacket will give you a hint of what's to come in this book. That digging into why Gonzalo is doing this with this young man, what his reasons are, and maybe what the young man's reasons are, is invariably going to bring the investigation closer to Paola's family than is comfortable for either her or Brunetti. And that will worry readers in a good way. Because readers, I'm sure I'm not the only reader of this series who has come to treasure their relationship. In fact, there's a wonderful scene that I want to read you that gives you a hint of what it's like. Brunetti captures it, or Donna Leone captures it perfectly. They've just had a party and there are a whole bunch of empty bottles. And Brunetti is wondering, oh my God, did we drink that much? And she says, before you start thinking about joining AA, Guido, let me remind you that more than a dozen bottles disappeared on New Year's Eve. There were at least 20 people here. I'd forgotten, Brunetti confessed. Hearing this, Paola covered her face with her hands, turned and leaned over the railing, and using a voice she reserved for imitating soap operas, called down into the empty street, I spent 3 days preparing food for that party. 3 days, and he's forgotten it. Brunetti ignored her and directed his attention to the campanile at San Marco. From his right side came the sound of choked sobbing. He glanced at her quickly and caught her peeking at him through her fingers. Shall I open the last bottle, then? He asked. Her hands fell to her sides, and she smiled. Oh, what a good idea. She walked over to the still-seated Brunetti and leaned against his shoulder, then bent and kissed the top of his head. It was a wonderful party, wasn't it? Being here with you is better, Brunetti answered. Silence grew between them. Church bells began to ring. The sound filled him with the same sense of completion. He got to his feet and went to get the champagne. Well, that's relatively early in the book, before dark clouds will gather. But moments like that happen in every Donna Leone book, and they're wonderful. They ring so true. And also, even in a domestic scene like that, which is entirely meant to show you these two people together, Venice still trickles in. Any of you who've spent more than just one touristy day in Venice will know that you associate the place with church bells. That no matter where you are, they infiltrate your room. They infiltrate what you're doing. This is extremely well done. There is no hint in these novels that I'm aware of. I don't know anything about Donna Leone. I don't know anything about her work habits. But there, to my ear, there is no hint anywhere in these novels of a practice writer phoning things in, or worse, handing them off to a ghostwriter, as a couple of very well-established writers of books in series have long since done. They've long since said, well, okay, your audition for me will be to show that you know how to imitate my prose exactly. In exchange for doing that, I will give you a plot, or I will approve of a plot that you give me, and I will give you a small percentage of what I get. And that's it. I won't give you any recognition. Your name won't be anywhere on the book, and you'll be legally disavowed from claiming any responsibility, and I'll go after you in court if you do. But if you want the practice, if you want the job, if you want the money, then the job is yours. There are some well-established writing names in font as big as that that do that. And she's not one of them, as far as I can tell. These feel careful, well-constructed, dutiful, and they always rise to the occasion. There are always grace notes, like the scene that I mentioned there. So as far as a murder mystery that is very much a location mystery, I don't think it gets more successfully done than this. So, once again, I'm not sure this will always be true in March Mystery Madness, but this is going to be a recommend. I recommend not only this latest novel, but this whole series. It started with Death at La Fenice. That we didn't know, readers didn't know, Donna Leone didn't know that this series would take off. I'm sure she had no idea that 3 decades later she'd still be writing them. Death at La Fenice is a very successful murder mystery. So is Acqua Alta, which was one of the books of the early books in the series that really took off for her. But any of them can be read independently of any others, which is incredible. That is an incredible feat. It gets harder as it goes along, and this is a perfect example. If you've got $30, is this $30? $26, yeah, $30. If you've got $30 to spare at your bookstore, and you're interested in Venice, and or you maybe want a location-based murder mystery, and you pick this up at your bookstore, and you think, well, I've got the $30, but I'm not going to understand anything that's going on here because the dust jacket tells me this is novel number 28 in a series. You don't have to worry about it. That's not this kind of series, so you can feel free. Or at your library, request at your library and see. I'd be willing to bet that if you're in the mood for a location-based police procedural, this will really work for you because these are done to work for you. So that is March Mystery Madness for day number 3. We'll go on to another book or another series tomorrow. We'll just keep talking about all these latest murder mysteries that you're going to see in your bookstores. But for now, I will wrap this up. but we will be back. Thank you, BookTube.